We're going to begin now on Daf Mem Vav Amud Beis. And here we contrast HaKadosh Baruch Hu with Midas Basar B'Dam. With regard to Basar B'Dam, a human being, Kli Reikon, if a person is empty of Torah, then, I'm sorry, second. Kli Reikon Machzik, Mole Eino Machzik. In the physical universe, the material finite universe, you could only put something into a Kli Reikon, a receptacle that has room. If it's filled, no room for anything. Midas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with regard to spirituality, it's the exact opposite. Mole Machzik. You have someone who is Mole V'Gadish, as we call it. His capacity for Torah is great. He has a storehouse of Torah knowledge. Then Machzik, give him more Torah, and he can accept more Torah. But Reikon, if he's empty of Torah, if he has not studied Torah in his youth, then Eino Machzik. It's going to be very challenging to teach Torah. Then Nemar, that's the double language of Vahaya Im Shamoa Tishma. Why the double language? Im Shamoa, which means if you study Torah, then Tishma. Then you're a Kli Machzik, and now we can add more Torah to you. But in Lav, if you're an empty Kli, you don't even have the basics, because in your youth, you did not take Torah seriously, then Lo Tishma. Another interpretation of the double language, Shamoa Tishma, Im Shamoa B'Yashan, Tishma B'Chadash. Rashi identifies Yashan. See, with regard to the first statement on the third line from top, Yaldusva, in your youth. The second interpretation, Machazim, see the word Machazim. That's at the end of the fourth line in Rashi. Machazim means to review. If you review your lessons, then all of a sudden you see new insights. And that's how Musash was for us doing Daf Yomi. Let's review the Daf. Is Tishma B'Chadash, you'll be able to see new insights. But if you learn it once, and then you'll distract yourself in a different direction, Shuvlo Tishma, you'll never become a Machadash. You won't be able to see new insights. And you'll see Rashi about 7 lines down from the top. The Mishnah goes on to say that at some point we take the esrog from the children and we can eat them, but do whatever we want with them. On the last day of Sukkot, the entire day is asur. Behana, you cannot use the esrog for any personal purposes for the entire day. That means in the morning of the 7th day, I already took my esrog. Now I have no purpose and no mitzvah left. Why can't I chop it up and make jelly out of it? No, I'm not allowed to do it. We'll see why in a minute. But b'shmini, on Shmini Atzeres Mutter, you can serve esrog, fresh esrog jelly on Shmini Atzeres. But Sukkah, let's say I want to benefit from the schach that was designated for the mitzvah of Sukkah. Afilu b'shmini asur. Even on Shmini Atzeres, it's forbidden. Reish Lakish Elmar, esrog afilu b'shmini nami mutter. He was yotzei his mitzvah in the morning of the 7th day. He no longer designated it for a mitzvah. All he had in mind was to be yotzei the mitzvah, and he fulfilled his mitzvah. So let him make esrog jelly on the 7th day, on Hoshana Rabbah. But my come with me, what are they arguing about? And this has to do with a principle called migu. In the laws of muktzah on Shabbos, the law is if you have 2 days consecutively that are sanctified, and something was muktzah on the first day, it automatically becomes muktzah on the 2nd day. That's called migu. Migu means since going into the 2nd day during Bein HaShmashos, it was muktzah, it remains muktzah for the entire 2nd day. We project muktzah from day 1 to day 2 through the mechanism called migu. Mar Sover, according to Reish Lakish, limitzvos is katzoi. You designate it for a mitzvah. There's no din of migu with regard to a designation of a mitzvah. Migu only applies in Kedushas Hayom, going from one sanctified day to the next, but not in terms of a mitzvah. a mitzvah was designated and singled out for that mitzvah. I fulfilled the mitzvah, says Reish Lakish, it's no longer muktzah. Umar Savar, lekule yoma is katzar. That even with regard to huktzah mitzvaso, bein hashmashos, going into the last day, which is the 8th day in Chutz La'aretz, we already activate the principle of migu. But notice that Rabbi Yochanan only activated the principle of migu with regard to sukkah. And in fact, Reish Lakish didn't say a word about sukkah. And the point of contention here between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish was about the Esrog. And we'll have to figure out why sukkah is different than Esrog. In sukkah, it seems that even Shmuel would say that the sukkah and the hana from the stach is prohibited. It's prohibited. Thank you if you can, yeah. It's prohibited on the 8th day. And apparently, what the Gemara is assuming is that if, let's say, I wanted to eat a meal at the end of the 7th day, it's after Ben Hashmashal, it's during Ben Hashmashal, after Shkia, going into Shmini Atzeres, I would have to pick myself up and eat in the sukkah, because maybe it's the 7th day. But with regard to the Esrog, we don't take the Esrog Ben Hashmashos. And that's because Esrog is only a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. We apply the principle of Sofei d'Rabbanan l'kula. So if you want to know whether it's muktzah going into the 8th day, in the Ben Hashmashos from 7 to 8, here we're going to differentiate between sukkah and lulav. As far as sukkah is concerned, here we have a machlokas between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, but as far as lulav is concerned, it would seem that everybody, no, I'm sorry. Let me say that again. Scratch it. With regard to lulav, meaning esrog in this case, in Bein HaShmashos going to the 8th day, we have machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan who asks it and Reish Lakish who matters it. But with regard to sukkah, is it seems from the absence of Reish Lakish is arguing that he accepts Rabbi Yochanan that the sukkah is asur b'ana in the 8th day, and we apply the principle of mig. But my committee, okay, so we saw that. Ace Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. The Mishnah says, "Miyad tinoko shomtim eslu ve'em v'yochanan esrogdeim." We're talking on the 7th day, and we've already taken the esrog in the morning, and now we grab the esrog for the children and we eat the esrog. My love, who had been with Dolim, again, the Mishnah mentions the case where we take it from a katan. You know, if it's a gadol, everybody wants to take his own esrog home, and his wife will make jelly out of it. But in the case of a katan, so we apparently there's no kapeda. So Gemara says, so there's a kash on Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan holds that the esrog is muktzah for the entire day, the 7th day. Lo tinokas dafku. We're not going to apply this even to Gadol and say that the Gadol could take his esrog and make jelly out of it on the 7th day after he was yotz. No. Only for Ketanim will allow. Ika the Amri Esfei Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish goes the other way around. It was Rabbi Yochanan who asked the Kash Reish Lakish because the Mishnah only allows it in the case of Tinokos. Miyada Tinokos Shom Tues Lulaveim V'Yochanan Esesrogam Tinokos in Gedolim Lo. Apparently, we have to conclude that the esrog is muktzah l'mitzvasa for the entire 7th day, and we can't take the esrog and use it on the 7th day. We can use it, however, on the 8th day because we won't take the esrog during Bein HaShmashos to the 7th day going into the 8th. More answers in the name of Reish Lakish, who I did not feel Gdolim. So why did the Mishnah only mention Ketanim? Hai de Ketani Tinokos, Urcha de Milsa Ketani. This was the way they did it. They would, there was a certain hefkerus. Again, you might ask, how can I grab, the esrog out of the hands of the children? That's not fair either. I mean, if it's my child, maybe I bought it so I can take it. But it sounds like it was a little bit of a hefker though. People are just grabbing esrog from children. But that was the accepted minhag. Very, very strange kind of minhag for our ears. But that was the minhag. There was no gzela if I took. But as far as Olam is concerned, although I can take my own Esrog, according to Eish and I can eat it on the 7th day after I was Yotzei, but the minhag wasn't to snatch it from somebody else, one adult to take it from another. So Papa turns to Abai and he says, Rabbi Yochanan, Maishna Sukkah, Maishna Esrog. And this is what we discussed earlier. Why is it that with regard to Esrog, Rabbi Yochanan says the Esrog is Mukta even? I'm sorry, the Esrog is Mukta only for the balance of the 7th day, but not on the 8th day. With regard to Sukkah, the Schach is Mukta even on the 8th day. I think more answers are Malay. Sukkah, the Chazik, and Hashmoshos. In an event that I have a meal to eat on Bein Hashmoshos going into the 8th day, I will go into the Sukkah, and therefore the Sukkah is Mukta even for the 8th day because Migu. The Isrami Le Sudasa, Boy Mesif Begava, Umechel Begava. If he wants to sleep, he's going to sleep in the Sukkah. Wants to eat, he's going to eat in the Sukkah. Is therefore skatzoil ben hashmoshos. So the muktzah extends into ben hashmoshos, which means the beginning of the 8th day, and therefore the entire 8th day is included in muktzah. But esrog lo chazi ben hashmoshos. In an event that he didn't take the esrog in the morning, or maybe he has doubts whether he did, he will not take the esrog ben hashmoshos. And therefore, so that's as far as Sukkah is concerned. As far as, Esrog is concerned, but as far as Sukkah is concerned, then we apply the principle of Migu, because just in case he has a meal to eat. I'm not exactly sure why the Gemara uses that language. De'im Isramile Seudasa. Let me just, if it was Vade Laila. Meaning it's don't eat in the sukkah. But since it's something yom, something laila, if he would have to eat, second, he would eat in the door. If he eats outside the sukkah, then he's violating the Ben Hashmoshos is yom, so he's chayav in a mitzvah doraisa of sukkah. As far as the meal on Shmini Atzeres is. Okay, we'll come back to this in a minute. I just want to get back to the issue of the meal at night of Shmini Atzeres, where they eat in the sukkah. Okay, so right now the Gemara is saying that the schach itself is muktzah, even on the 8th day, according to Rabbi Yochanan, and the reason for that is because of migu. And the reason for the migu is because in an event that he eats a suda during Bein Hashmoshos from 7 to 8, he will have to eat it in the sukkah. The Levi Omer, Esrog afilu b'shmini os. Levi went a step further. We never saw such a sheep. We didn't see Shmuel arguing with Rabbi Yochanan about the Esrog. But now Levi disagrees, and he says that even the Esrog is muktzah on Shmini. And it sounds like Levi is holding that there is a mitzvah doraisa of lulav on the 7th day, and therefore, if he didn't take the lulav of the esrog during the day, he would have to take it Bein Hashmoshos. Alternatively, and I think this is a better way of interpreting Levi, Levi holds that once Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai made a takana, and we make a bracha on that takana, it's a full-fledged mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Then something d'Rabbanan lechumra in this case, meaning in a case where you don't know whether or not he was. I would say the following. This is too complicated for us now. I'll just say Pekitzer, if it goes over, it goes over. If not, let it fly. There's a halacha of cheskas chiyuv, meaning I knew I had a chiyuv midrabanan albeit on the 7th day. Now it's Bein Hashmoshos. I don't know if I've started the 8th day and it's too late for taking the lulav, or it's still the 7th day. So we have what's called a cheskas chiyuv. meaning I spill over, I carry over the chiyuv that I definitely had a minute before Shkiyas HaKama into the period after Shkiyas HaKama. In any event, it becomes now muktzah ben hashmashos going into the 8th day, because an event that I have to take the lulav, yes, on ben hashmashos going into the 8th, that makes it muktzah for the 8th day. Avur de Shmuel Amar, the father of Shmuel, said that esrog b'shvi asur b'shmini mutter, repeating the exact same ruling of Rabbi Yochanan. Avur de Shmuel b'shitase the Levi. However, at a later period of time, Avur de Shmuel rejected his original position, and he accepted the position of Levi that even an esrog is mukta on the 8th day. However, paradoxically, Rabbi Zera b'shitase Avur de Shmuel. Rabbi Zera changed his mind, and he subsequently embraced the shita of Avur de Shmuel, which is the shita of Rabbi Yochanan, which means that there is no din of mukta in esrog on the 8th day. The Amar of Zera, esrog shenifsala asur liofla kol shiva. Now, if you take a look at Rashi, which is about 10 lines up before the end of the Amud, Rashi says, Rabusid Nakat, Yafilu Nifsala, Asura Kol Shiva, Pilla, Ela V'chiduchi. On the first day of Sukkot, my esrog never fell and the pitum fell off. It's possible. Nevertheless, Asura Kol Shiva. Why? Shemitchila Shiva Huktzah. Which means that the similar concept to what we saw earlier today, if you recall, in Amud Aleph, that one bracha suffices for all 7 days, because all 7 days is considered Yom HaRichta. It's like one long day. The same kind of concept applies with regard to Sukkah, with regard to Esra, which means that when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai organized a mitzvah of Esra called Shiva, it's an extension of the mitzvah d'oraisa the first day. It's not a separate entity. And therefore, the status of muktzah is how on all 7 days as one indivisible chunk, one unit. Aval b'shmini, this is the punchline, muteres. So we see clearly that Reb Zera rescinded his original position that an esrog is prohibited on the 8th day, and he finally accepted Avur de Shmuel, which is also the opinion of Yochanan, and that's how we paskin that the esrog is mutter on the 8th day. On Rav Zera, lo likne inich hoshana liyanuk, the Yom Tov HaKam. On the first day of Yom Tov, that's called Yom Tov HaKam, you should not be makne the lulav to your child. Why? The Yanuka mikne kani. Rashi points out, mikne kani dirabbanon, about 8 lines up before the end of the Yom. This is a takanas chachamim that a child has a kinyan. But aknuye lo mikne, if you haven't fulfilled your mitzvah, you need ownership to fulfill your mitzvah. He doesn't have the power to transfer the lulav back to you. Because nothing, the lulav chain or chalo, it's takach will turn out that if he gives you back the lulav, you will not be able to acquire the lulav. And Rashi says, because the katan doesn't have das. You see, aknuye lo makne, Rashi says, "Eina yochel lachzor laknoso li'aviv b'matana dilav bar dasu." And all the Mefarshim jump on this Rashi because they say that Rashi seems to imply that if the katan would be a bar das, and the Gemara establishes in the Babas, I think it's in Bava Basra, if I'm not mistaken, that a katan, once he reaches a certain age, that he is mature enough to understand masu matan, he knows what it means to sell and to buy, and he appreciates what it means to acquire ownership of something, then the Rabbanan established that his kinyan is valid. So the same kinyan the Rabbanan that allowed him to be kohen in the katan is now going to facilitate his being makner. So Rashi is learning that this whole problem with the katan only exists because ein lo das. He's a 5-year-old, or maybe a 4-year-old. But if he's a 7-year-old, maybe a 12-year-old, I don't know how old he is, and he's yodea b'masu matan, he understands and appreciates maturely what it means to buy and sell, then there is no problem. Because the same Rabbanan that recognized his kinyan when he was kohen in the lulav can now recognize his kinyan when he's makner. But in any event, this sugi is very relevant to the whole question whether a kinyan to Rabbanan is relevant on a doraisa. The Amar Rabbi Zera, Lolema inish liyanuka the ahivna lemide v'lo yoyev. Very often we make promises to children and we don't live up to our promises. This is so true after Pesach, is it not? Yeah, he asked for a bicycle. Yeah, did you give him the bicycle? I'm giving myself most of it because my grandchildren, they make a hard bargain. Yeah. They don't realize that I have my own afikomen stashed away. But again, if this is what they'll be happy with, we'll fine. We'll buy him a gift. I'm not sure exactly whether this is a Jewish minhag or not, but anyway, this is the minhag. We buy him a gift. We negotiate over the afikomen. So the oxilat muri shikra, you are trading the child and exposing him to lies. The Nemar and the Torah teaches us, I think it's a pasuk in Yirmiyahu, I'm not sure, we'll see. Limdu l'shonam daber sheker. Be careful not to teach children sheker. I mean, this is so important in education. People, they say things to children, they don't care themselves. Now we go back to the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. If Shiva esrogim l'shivas yom, a man designated 7 esrogim for 7 days, each day a separate esrog. Wealthy guy. Amar Rav, kol achas v'achas yotzei b'avi ochol li'alt. The mukta is only for the mitzvah. This is Reish Lakish. The Rav accepted Reish Lakish. Now you yotze the mitzvah. It's no longer mukta. Go eat it. Rav Asi Omer kol achas v'achas yotze b'avi ochol l'machar. Every day is a separate entity. But my kabifgi, Mar Sover going to Rav l'mitzvah is katzoy. He accepts Reish Lakish. The Reish Lakish says on the 7th day after you yotze, then you can eat the esrog. And here, every day, vis-a-vis that esrog, it's like the 7th day. You yotze the mitzvah, go eat the esrog. Umar Sovar. But according to Rav Asi, on the other hand, l'kule yoma is katzoy, except the sheet of Rav Yochanan, that the muktzah is chal on the entire day. And what that means in the case of an esrog is that every day, this particular esrog is muktzah for the entire day. Even though he was yotze in the morning, he cannot make jelly out of it until after Shkir. The Ananda Islay Trey Yomi, in our Golus that we have, Yontif Sheni Shel Golus, Hechi Avdina, what should we do? Amar Abaye, Shmini Sofik Shvi Asur, the esrog is now Asur on the 8th day. And the reason for that is because maybe the Shmini is actually Shvi. We don't know. We're not beginning B'Kviyah D'Yarcha. But Shvi, when we get to the 9th day, which is already Simchas Torah in Chutz La'aretz, then Sofek Shmini, we don't know if it's the 8th day, because even if it's the 8th day, it was not set aside for 8 days. The mitzvah of Sukkah is 7 days, not 8 days. But Remar Omar, Afilu Shmini Sofek Shvi Mutter, we don't have to be machmir and yotav sheni shel golios as far as eating the esrog on the 8th day, because then you're adding a chumrah on top of a chumrah. And now the mitzvah of esrog is we don't take an esrog on the 8th day. So when he was makta the esrog and he designated, it was only for the first 7 days, not for Shmini Atzeres. Besura avdi k'mar remar, and they accepted the shita of Meremar l'chumra, but Rav Shesha Breder Rav Idiovi Kabai l'chua, and Hilchas Kabai, we accept the opinion of Abaye. This is where we're going to stop for today, because we ran out of time. Omar Rav Yehuda, which is 4 lines up from the bottom of the Om. Amen. Wish everyone a great day. Thank you.